Welcome to the Milford Township Planning Commission and the monthly Planning Commission meeting. I'm sorry. 2024 to order. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You folks signed the attendance sheet on the back table, I hope. Okay, very good. Thank you. That's for the record. Before we begin, I will call for a motion to accept the minutes of last month's meeting as written.
Motion to accept? Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. I'd like to introduce the Planning Commission and our support staff. I'm going to start on my far left over there, your right. At the end is Lydia Caparoso, the Township Solicitor. Next to her is Matt Waldinger, the Director of Planning and Development. Planning Commission members are Scott Stewart, Doug Prozan, I'm Gene Strohmeyer, David Fugate. I knew that. Next to him there is Matt Puzz, the Zoning and Development Officer, and next to him is Julie Maggio, the Assistant Zoning and Development Officer. Milford Township Planning Commission is a recommending body that hears testimony, asks and answers questions, deliberates and passes our recommendations on to the Milford supervisors who make the final decisions on issues brought before us. The minor amendments to the zoning ordinance discussed tonight, if acted on by the Planning Commission, will be considered by the Township Supervisors at their regular meeting to be held on Tuesday, June 25th, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. in the Township Assembly Building. The first and only item on the agenda tonight is a minor amendments to the zoning ordinance. At the request of the Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission is review and make recommendations for minor amendments to the zoning ordinance. Mr. Puzz.
Oh no, I was gonna say, please, do you want to maybe go over the schedule though first, just to kind of make it clear? Do you have a copy, or would you like?
Yeah, I did not grab a copy.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Think about that. Good evening, gentlemen. Here to discuss the minor zoning ordinance amendments. So the timeline would be...
Can you hear okay back there? Okay.
So the timeline for the zoning ordinance amendment. Thank you. Would be, so today's the initial meeting for the Planning Commission. So this is your first time seeing it. I'll allow you to digest it. You make any comments over the next month. The next meeting, May 7th, you would make your recommendation, assuming there's nothing substantially, there's no substantial changes that need to be made to the ordinance. If that's the case, it may delay it, but at this point, we're on track for the recommendation for May 7th. May 8th through June 7th, that would allow county planning to begin their 30-day review period, as well as the township solicitor would begin their review and incorporating the changes into the working draft. And after the 30-day appeal period, the next meeting for the Board of Supervisors would be June 25th. So that's when they would vote on amending the ordinance. And if it gets approved, then the changes would go into effect, I believe, 10 days after the approval. But right now we are on schedule, so I can say that. So the new zoning ordinance went into effect, I believe, in May of 2022. Over the course of approximately 2 years, we've noticed that there have been, some minor, I won't necessarily call them errors, but some inconsistencies in the ordinance, as well as some typos. There have also been issues that have been brought to the zoning hearing board that we felt should be incorporated into the ordinance as well. And as we go through the proposed changes, I'll let you know where and why and how they came up. The first change, it's very minor, the word draft is actually still on top of the ordinance that was approved, so it would be to remove that word. It's not necessarily a big deal, but just kind of clean up the draft. Now, we do have some definition modifications. The first one would be for high-rise sign, as it currently stands, is written as a freestanding sign having a maximum height of 8, in parentheses, 80 feet. We would suggest, for consistency, removing the 8 and putting an 80. So that's just a typo. Down the next item, directional information signs, it currently states that they should not exceed 4 square feet, which is inconsistent with the sign ordinance section, which allows directional signs up to 5 square feet. So it would be to add the statement, and provided that such sign does not exceed 5 square feet unless otherwise stated. The otherwise stated will come into play later on when we talk about industrial signs. The industrial district will allow directional signs to be a little larger because as you pull into an industrial park, you may need to see, like, trucking head left. You might not be able to see that if it's only 5 square feet. Next, we would add 2 definitions. These are directly from the Pennsylvania State Code regarding group child care homes and a family child care home. The reason why we are adding these is that this has come up where
Yeah, I've never heard this do this before, so I'm not sure what's causing it.
Okay.
But anytime I cut it off, it cuts off the audio.
All right, I'll do my best to ignore it. I apologize. No, it's all right. So currently in the zoning ordinance, there is no allotment for group child care home as well as family child care home. Pennsylvania State will actually inspect and issue licenses without us being aware of it. So this is to allow these uses in the zoning ordinance. Later on, in the next page, actually, we would add those two those 2 uses, the home child care and the daycare home, to the permitted use tables as accessory uses in the CR, R1, and R2 districts. It makes sense to put them there because basically you cannot have a child care home without a home. The group child care home actually allows for more children. It can be in a home, but also could be in another type of use like a school or a church, something like that. So right now we don't permit those. The state permits them, so this is just to be consistent with what the state has.
Are those definitions like the state's definitions?
They are, except I added, or we added, I should say, when,
The last sentence?
yeah, when located in a residence, the use shall be considered an accessory use. Basically say that you're allowed to have it as an accessory use. It cannot be the primary use, as well as you have to comply with the underlying zoning district, which would prohibit signage. Since these are in residential districts, we don't want signage for them, so that these uses as dwellings do not permit signage. The definition for naming rights we'll talk about in a little bit. So moving on, we have, before I continue, is there any issues with the modifications to the definition section? Thank you. So the error corrections, and these are just some minor typos that we noticed. The first one, section 145-29C3B, if you read that, I'll read it. No structure or uses, including but not limited to building, accessory structures, parking spaces, and curbs may be located any closer than 5 feet to any side lot line, except that access drives directly to the street or adjacent properties, underground structures, retaining walls, earthen retention systems, natural landscape materials, sidewalks connected to public walks, signs, and lighting devices, then it cuts off. So that's basically a fragment, and it should say may be located in the buffer area, which is consistent with the other buffer area or the buffer requirements in the ordinance. So it would be just to add may be located in the buffer area to be consistent as well with the rest of the ordinance. For section 14538B, it says special even. It should say special events, so we would add the T and S to it to make it consistent with its section. Section 14541D2C states a maximum of 12, in parentheses, 24 birds shall be permitted on any one lot. That is regarding chickens and ducks, the non-commercial keeping of chickens and ducks. We'd suggest taking out 12, putting in 24. Section 145-106B4 says applications for variance from the terms of this chapter, the floodplain or floor hazard ordinance. It should say flood hazard ordinance, so remove the R, add a D. And then section 145-107A7, construction of installation of swimming pools. That should read construction or installation of swimming pools. So change of to or. As far as the minor corrections, those would be the only ones that, or the error corrections, those would be the only ones that we've seen so far. Any questions or concerns on those? No. Okay. On the second page, we have the use table amendments. Again, the only changes right now would be to add home child care and daycare home to the accessory uses for CR, R1, and R2. Any questions or concerns? All right. On the next change would be a deletion to section 14527D. An open porch may be erected in a front yard extending for a distance of not more than 10 feet beyond the required setback, provided that it is located no closer to an adjoining lot's property line than the required width of the side yard. Then it continues on, at no time is an open porch permitted beyond the building line shown on the recorded plot for the property if one exists. We would suggest removing at no time is an open porch permitted beyond the building line shown on the recorded plot for the property if one exists. This is, should be to come, the reason for this one is to become consistent with a zoning hearing board issue we had a few years ago regarding the building line. So just to take that out and clean up the ordinance. Any issues, concerns on that one, questions? All right. Next, the changes to sections. This is probably the largest portion that we have. So section 14531, we would propose to add the following. G, this is in regards to fences and hedges. Fences located within the required setback and associated with sporting facilities may exceed the maximum height for a fence in the zoning district. At no time shall a fence exceed the maximum building height limitation of the zoning district that the fence is located in. This was another issue that came up in front of the zoning hearing board. We had a sporting stadium that wanted to have or I shouldn't call it a sporting stadium, but a sporting facility that wanted to have a fence so balls and other objects wouldn't be able to fly out. Current ordinance only permits a maximum of 8 foot in a commercial district, which is clearly not high enough. They ended up being granted a variance for 30 feet. For us, or for me at least, this makes sense to make it consistent so that we don't have to, well, one, it's more of a health safety issue to allow sporting venues to have higher fences. Any questions or concerns on that one? Nope. Okay. Next, section 14537A, we propose to add the following, number 3, at no time shall a recreation vehicle be permitted to be parked or stored on a lot without a principal structure. This is in regards to storage and parking of recreation and camping vehicles and equipment. We've had issues recently where somebody wants to park a vehicle, I shouldn't say vehicle, a recreation vehicle, excuse me, on a vacant lot with no house, and we want to avoid that in residential districts, and this is a clearer way to state that. The ordinance kind of says it in a roundabout way, but this would be more direct, and then we can actually cite this instead of trying a more roundabout way to have the recreational vehicle removed.
So if someone owns 2 adjacent lots, a house on one,
Mm-hmm.
you're saying they have a recreation or RV,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a trailer or a driven vehicle, they cannot park it during the summer when they're home on the vacant lot.
They could combine the 2 lots into one lot and be able to, so they could combine the lots into one lot and park on it that way. That would be an appropriate way to solve that.
If I could, the issue that we've been having, Gene, was where somebody just owned a vacant lot. They weren't an adjacent property owner, they owned a lot in a residential area and chose that as a place to park
I can
their,
see where that, but
park their RV or.
the one, if I owned a lot next to me and I didn't have room in my driveway for a 45-foot motor coach,
And this would permit that, like Matt said, we would ask that you combine the 2 lots so that it's one parcel. It would have a principal structure there. Again, this isn't a case where it was a neighbor doing it. It was somebody that lived miles away,
Right.
bought a vacant lot,
I
and
can-
just parked
I'm-
there.
thoroughly in agreement with that.
And I think too, and I don't have the whole section in front of me, isn't there something too that recreational vehicles have to be parked behind the front plane
The
of
building.
the building?
Yes.
Or in the driveway,
Or in the driveway?
yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and if you can afford a 45-foot motorhome, you could have a bigger lot. Okay.
You understand what it's trying to prevent?
Yeah, I agree with
It all
You want
makes
me to buy a
sense.
bigger one?
Yeah, bigger one, that's what you need.
Okay.
Any questions or concerns on that one?
No.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Strohmeyer. Next, this is in regards to the use of accessory car washes. This was an issue that went in front of the zoning hearing board. It was determined that if it says car wash accessory as a permitted accessory use, then it's an accessory use to all uses. The problem with that is that accessory structures are not required to have land development plans under the municipality's planning code, as well as the ordinance it specifically excluded car wash accessories from the supplemental regulations, which meant that none of those applied, so you could have somebody construct a 5,000 square foot car wash, call it an accessory car wash, call it an accessory car wash, which would then, not only would it be exempt from land development, but then the supplemental regulations with restrictions on time and sound would not apply. So this section would be to kind of clarify the differences between what we expect for a car wash as well as a car wash accessory. As the note states at the top, I didn't make any changes to the Part B of the car wash definition, or excuse me, the supplemental regulations for car washes. It would be to add Section A, car wash accessory, car wash, comma, accessories, shall not, that probably should read car washes, comma, accessory. I'll change that. 1 shall not exceed 750 square feet in gross floor area. 2 shall be limited to 1 car wash accessory per lot. 3 shall be constructed on the same lot as the principal structure and no further than 100 feet from the principal structure if not attached to the principal structure.
What are you talking about here, a shed?
So let's just say a convenience store wanted to have a car wash, one unit, one car at a time to go through that. That might fit under this, but if you're putting like 3, that would not fit. So it's that one-off, for lack of a better word, car wash that might fit under this versus naming it something else, but now I've got 5 bays where people are washing their cars.
Correct,
It's
correct.
like the get-go.
Yeah, and I think the definition of car wash, common accessory, I think defines it as a one-bay
Mhm.
scenario.
The intent was mostly for, places like, auto body shops, like, you know, there now a lot of dealerships might have, might wash cars, you take it in for service and they'll wash your car for you. It's that type of a car wash,
Or to
more
a
so
gas
than, or to a gas station rather than,
Mhm.
like a full service multi-car.
Mhm. Yeah, and if a, a car wash was proposed that didn't meet the definition of the accessory or didn't comply with the supplementals, then it would be considered, you know, the principal car wash. And if it was a permitted use, then they would have to go through the land development process and follow the supplemental regulations.
Makes sense.
Okay, so going to 750 feet requires, does that require a land development plan now?
No,
Still doesn't, okay.
no.
Okay.
It may require like an amended land development plan if there's already an existing land development on file, but.
All right.
Any questions or concerns with that one?
Do I think with the time limits, I know you talked about, Julie, the hours I kind of talked about, they can't even use the blowers and whatnot after 9 PM. Is any of that gonna apply to car wash and accessory?
I mean, it didn't in the beginning, or the original ordinance didn't have that as a
I
requirement.
didn't know if we were, since we're updating that, and
Yeah, I would think that,
I just don't know what time, like, geckos and other type of places, if it's open to the public, rather than just the dealer, like, car dealer's closing at 5. But if it's a car wash accessory to some other use, like what time are they stopping? Because I don't know what time I can go up to the get-go and just run through there.
right, we could add number 6 from the supplementals, when a car wash accessory abuts a residential zoning district, the operation of blowers and other power equipment aside from the wash operation shall be prohibited after 9 and prior to 8 on all days of every week. You just move one of those up there. That,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah,
Although, it could be a pretty big business change for somebody who has 4 or 5 bays. I'm thinking of a car wash on Westlake Road that's close to residential, so I don't know. So, one to think about though. I agree that we should have some consistency, but it might be an interesting business practice change for some.
yeah. I mean, the other option would just be, have those, the supplementals apply to all car washes regardless of accessory or principal. And
You could do it that way, and or you could do like, these are in addition to the ones for just car washes, generally, these are the additional supplementals for car wash accessory for whatever reason.
those changes, make those changes?
Yes.
Okay.
You're
Thank you.
waiting for somebody to answer, so
Well,
yes.
yeah, it was just some input, so add supplementals to all car washes. Thank you. Okay. So for the next changes would be for the sign sections. We're actually going to skip the multifamily first. And if you could go to the 4th page. We'll start with, and the reason why is that the residential portion's a little more, had the most changes. So I want to spend the most time on that. So section 145-85, this applies to signage in the C2, the general commercial district. This is basically like the mall or the Walmart on Westlake Road. I'm sorry, not Westlake Road, West Ridge Road. We've had some variances where they've come in and asked for additional signage to accommodate that, so we can avoid the variance request. Basically, when you start having multiple variance requests, that basically indicates that there's a problem with the ordinance. So to accommodate that, we are changing it from 1 square feet of signage for every 1 foot of linear store frontage to 2 square feet of signage for every 1 foot of linear store frontage. So basically, it doubles the limit, and generally speaking, commercial districts like that tend to have large signs. So, any questions or?
That'll take care of the variances that are coming in front of you right now.
I'd like to think so,
Yeah.
but
They're just gonna want bigger now. They're gonna want 4 square feet.
But I guess, just to clarify, it's not so much variances that are requested, but it's variances that are granted.
Gotcha.
People are actually being granted variances for
mhm,
signs of this size, and so that indicates.
yeah. Mm. Next would be to change, again, this is in the C2 district. This is regarding freestanding signs. The way the ordinance is currently written, there's no limit to the number of freestanding signs a building that contains 1 or 2 uses could have. So that's an issue. So we would propose to add 3 for principal structures that contain 1 or 2 uses. The reason why it's 1 or 2 uses, that 3 or more is considered a shopping center, which then does have limitations. Freestanding sign shall not exceed 1 freestanding sign per road frontage, not to exceed 2 freestanding signs for the building. Any concerns or questions with that? All right, and then the final change in that section would be to move 3 to 4. That's a minor change. Section 145-86, this is in regard to industrial signage. So building signs, you go down to B, building signs, 3 shall not exceed 1 sign per building unless located on a corner. It should read, shall not exceed 1 sign per tenant unless located on a corner. And this is to accommodate multiple tenants in an industrial building. Right now, it would just only permit 1 building sign, and if there's multiple tenants, they would have to fight over signage. And C, this is, so currently in the industrial district, freestanding signs are required to be a minimum of 7 foot, they're required to have a minimum of 7 foot clearance to the ground, no higher than 15 feet. The problem is we don't allow for monument signs, so this amendment would be to permit, or this change would be to permit monument signs. So we'd add 3, in case of a monument sign, the maximum height of the sign shall not exceed 8 feet in height and shall maintain a minimum setback from the right-of-way at 10 feet. Pretty straightforward there. And then directional signs, which I had mentioned earlier. This is on the last page. It would state directional signs shall not exceed 24 square feet in surface area and shall not exceed 8 feet in height. And again, this is to allow for larger signage in an industrial area, so pickups, trucks can see where they're supposed to go. Any concerns, questions on that? All right, let's go back to section 145-83. The first change in this section, B, would be to remove multifamily dwellings and just have it state the following applies to permanent monument signs on property with multifamily dwellings and multiple residents. The reason why is that multifamily dwellings, how do I want to say this? It's more than just multifamily dwellings. It allows for legal non-conforming uses, conforming non-residential uses. Then another issue that was brought in front of the zoning hearing board is in regards to I always say industrial, institutional buildings or conforming non-residential buildings are not permitted to have signage on the building. So this is our attempt to allow that. And when I say institutional, you want to think parks, playgrounds, schools, churches, places of worship, I should say. So it would be to add a section C, wall signs for conforming non-residential uses and legal non-conforming uses. Following applies to permanent wall signs on properties with conforming non-residential uses and legal non-conforming uses. 1, the conforming non-residential uses, maximum wall sign square footage shall be determined by the following. 1, total wall sign area shall not exceed 5% of the total wall area that the wall sign is attached to that directly faces a public street or parking lot. Next, this would go into naming rights for a building. I skipped over this, the first page on definitions. We would add the definition naming rights, the name, which is defined as the right to name a piece of property, either tangible property or event, usually granted in exchange for financial consideration. So naming rights would be permitted as a conditional use, provided that that first one is not supposed to be in there. So I apologize. So naming rights count towards the maximum wall sign square footage established above. Naming rights do not meet the definition of an off-premise sign or billboard commercial outdoor advertising sign. And then the third condition would be the Board of Supervisors may, at their discretion, attach such reasonable conditions and safeguards as it may deem necessary to implement the purposes of this chapter. So this would allow naming rights as a conditional use, which would be reviewed by the Planning Commission first for your recommendations. And you've already done this before in the Presque Isle District when there's a new sign down there. And then you'd make your recommendation, it'd go to the Board of Supervisors for their vote.
Okay, so the first line is being scratched, correct?
Correct, yeah, the part where it
Or
says,
it's actually incorporated.
yeah, I didn't mean to include that, I apologize.
And what about the, some language about logos and things like that? How do you think you're gonna handle that?
The logo, I think, would fall under the naming rights definition.
It will?
That's how I
Will we
would,
get to see that definition?
yes, it's on the first page. It's highlighted naming rights.
Well, yeah, but I don't consider a logo to be part of, I don't know, I think that's too vague. I mean, I could see the names, but to put a logo on top of that, we discussed, I mean, you're talking every church then can do that. I'm not sure that's
Yeah, I mean, we could put something in there that would exclude logos.
exclude logos.
So just wordage, verbiage.
Oh, Pepsi Field, but you couldn't have the Pepsi logo.
Correct. And again, I'd like to see some uniformity as far as the lettering, but I'm not really hung up on that so much as I would be the logo.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's very difficult because some people use no verbiage and they just use the logo. You know, you can have somebody that
Like,
wants to.
give me an example if you can.
Nope. Matt, you got anything?
Well, I was
There's a
yeah,
ton of
I
them.
mean, a lot, there are some where the word mark is their logo, like UPMC, for example. They could have UPMC Field, but they would put it in their font, their colors.
Which is basically their
It is,
logo, so you're saying
correct.
you can do it, that's your logo, and then, so that's hard to do that. Because the words are their logo.
Or PNC
letters.
Bank Field.
And they'll have the little circle-y thing.
I understand that. I'm not sure what the answer is.
So based on current zoning, if I built a basketball arena on West Ridge Road here, I could sell naming rights for, again, company name, logo, that would be possible under current zoning
As long as it was in a commercial.
in a commercial.
district.
Correct. I was thinking of 26th Street,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the question is, using an example,
But this is,
a church that's in a neighborhood or something.
yeah, but see, this is residential zone.
Correct, correct,
So say like up on 32nd Street,
correct, right.
yeah, you would not be allowed to.
But yeah, your example, I think, is spot on. If there was a church that maybe they built a new church hall or, gathering space and someone wanted to sponsor that.
It's so that they could just come in and ask for a variance, and I think, any reasonable request would be granted. If somebody was having some type of field on, in a residential neighborhood, or an existing residential neighborhood, and they wanted to sell that field naming rights, see why that's that big of a deal.
I guess I would, just throw out that the way this is, at least this draft is written, it would be a conditional use, so it would have some rails and guidelines on it. Again, it would be presented to the planning commission for your suggestions. It would go to the board of supervisors where they could place conditions on. So, it wouldn't be the exact same mechanism of hearing before the zoning hearing board, but it would have some sort of controls and input both from the public and
Well,
commission.
my only concern is, I'd like it to be as understood as possible so that it doesn't get into a political kind of a thing, but I'm not sure how to do that.
And I don't think you would, I think in the context of naming rights, I think it's a little bit more on the commercial speech side
Sure.
of things. So you have a little bit more latitude in terms of regulating that content, versus like it's a free speech thing. Like if someone came in and wanted to turn it into like something political, that's a little bit more touchy in terms of.
Well,
what
when
you're
I meant
regulating,
political,
but-
I meant the supervisors not being consistent
No,
from
I know
one
that,
term
but
to the
in terms of
next.
Regulating the like if we consider it of the First Amendment considerations, which, again, most of the people I think that are gonna be giving naming rights is gonna be more commercial than it's gonna be commercial speech rather than First Amendment free speech. I'm saying what I want, and I wanna say that, Tom Smith is a terrible person on the name of the building.
Sure.
But, yeah, so you'll have, I think, a little more latitude in what you can regulate. Just want enough content.
I think another thing to point out too is, number 3, well, it would become number 2 because we scratched one, but number 3 about off-premise signs or billboard commercial advertising. The intent of that is that if it was a logo, potentially a logo could go there, and I know this is hard to do without giving examples of different companies, no derision meant to anybody, but for example, Burger King Gymnasium with the Burger King logo potentially would be okay, but they couldn't have, Home of the Whopper or Have It Your Way or, the advertising portion. It would just be the company recognition and not, advertising coffee or something like that as well, so.
But in your case, I think that the logo, if you will, is incorporated into the Burger King name, isn't it? Or,
Yes, something, yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, it looks like a logo kind of with.
I'm looking at the UPMC example. They are identified by UPMC. And that could be either classified as the name of it or as a logo, really. Because it not only is their name, but it's also their logo.
I'll tell you, this is opening up a real can of worms. Like I said, every church could potentially, because most of them are in residential areas.
Yeah, but I really don't see them doing that, but the potential is
But
there, yes.
what about 20 years from now when the coffers are kind of thin in the church and they need money?
Okay, I actually do have so the playground down at Tracy, my name on the side of that playground structure, would that be allowed? Because, I mean, I did a lot of work there and did a lot of stuff, so they gave me the sign on the side of the thing.
Well, this was purposely written for you, you know.
Yeah. So would that be disallowed now? And that's probably like a 4x4 sign.
Well, it's nothing that exists, anything that exists.
I
is
realize that,
allowed.
but in the future, so that would be, they'd have to come in and say, okay, this is what we're doing, and, yeah,
Mhm.
Seems to me we're trying to, as we
We're
are
overthinking
thinking through this, trying to find a balance between helping organizations as a way to potentially diversify income streams, or to say thank you for someone who's given a lot of gifts pro bono or in kind of things, pro bono, while also not wanting some signage that clearly is, you know, as I drive into my subdivision, I don't know if I want a big neon sign there or something. Subdivisions, supported by such and such. I mean, which theoretically, right, could, I mean, but you always have to do sometimes the most radical to be aware of what the possibilities are. So I think we're trying to strike a balance of helping organizations while understanding it is primarily a residential district and not having obtrusive signage.
Is
So
there any,
it's good the way it's written right now, because everything is restricted unless they come in to get a variance, and it's approved, correct?
Well, the zoning hearing board should not be acting as the arbiter in something like this. Because really, when they start granting variances, what they're doing is sidestepping the actual ordinance. So if we address the ordinance in such a way as to prevent that, but you kind of allow some latitude without giving up all control.
Yeah,
Oh, boy.
well,
yeah, and I know it's not a one-to-one analogy, but, you almost want to think of the zoning hearing board as if, you were convicted of a crime and you were trying to appeal your conviction. It's very it's similar in some ways where basically somebody comes in to apply for something, they are denied by the township because our rules, the zoning code says no, and then they're going to an outside party to, to try and get that overturned. And the township can be party to that, where we argue you should follow our rules, and they argue we want this special treatment. And so like Matt said, it shouldn't be kind of like the basis. And it's not easy, Dave made that point, to kind of craft a legislation that, fits that box. That's what we're attempting to do, kind of walk that path.
without me being completely knowledgeable about all the different ramifications of outdoor signs, with its naming rights, what happens if somebody's logo is illuminated?
Yeah, no illumination is permitted in the residential district.
Okay, that's what I wanted.
And if, as a conditional use, they could even make that even more strict if they, as a condition. Because I think right now they're allowed to, well, I think they're allowed to be illuminated from the ground up, but not like externally.
Or being outside.
Correct, correct. No Pabst Blue Ribbon on this one. No.
Well, you know, it's difficult because some of them might be just right, and some of them, I know an entrepreneur is gonna stretch the limit, so once you allow something, it's gonna be more than we think of in the future, you know, and we're trying to look out 20 years or so.
But if it's all based on getting a variance for different things through the zoning hearing board, you know,
And that's why
they'd have to look at every case and somehow come to some decision on whether this one does and this one doesn't, you know, or.
But again, the institutions and schools, churches, they rely on that money.
I know, but I don't think that's why we should make rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's say, go back to churches for a second, you're gonna have, I'm thinking, I could be wrong on this, but, somebody who has been a long-standing time member of this individual church leaves them $100,000 in their will because they were, nice to this person all their lives, or they were fully involved in the church. That person who died and left them $100,000 doesn't have any kind of a logo. It's gonna might be named Joe Blow
Sure.
Community Center or something like that, you know? So there's no logo involved in something like that, and that's perfectly legal, you know, to have that.
But there could be, that's my point.
I'm using churches, and I doubt there's going to be, but, you know, really seriously doubt that. But, I don't know.
And I'm not a big one for tabling stuff, but, so I guess we should decide, but.
Well, and we're not asking for any votes today, this is just to present to you, you definitely have time to sit with this over the next month. If you think of things, feel free to share them with us, we can incorporate those into, you know, whatever the next draft would be for May. I guess the only, you know, one other thing I wanna say is, it's kind of imperative, or, you know, it's an obligation of the township to provide as much surety as we can to people in our regulations. You know, if you
Right.
picture yourself as being a school or a house of worship that wants to do something, you should be able to look at the code and determine whether you can or
Right.
not.
That's how I,
Rather than, you know, gambling with the, you know, potential of the zoning hearing board, or, you know, which obviously also comes with a cost, you know, you have to pay to have that hearing, so. And we're trying to strike that balance, and again, that's why we fell with what we did, but we're open for suggestions or thoughts, you know, from you guys as you consider.
Okay.
All right. The only other change would be for, would be to add number 2. And this would be for legal non-conforming uses. Legal non-conforming uses would use the wall sign regulations from section 14584 C1, MU1, and MU2 districts. So basically, it would be restricted to no more than 24, or excuse me, a minimum of 24 square feet. You get 24 square feet for every 50 feet of frontage, up to a maximum of 48 square feet. So if there's like a doctor's office or restaurant in a residential district, they would be allowed to have some wall signage. It just wouldn't be anything
where's the name?
extravagant. Yeah, it's like right below,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Just the very bottom of the page.
I see, I'm sorry.
Any questions or concerns on that one? Okay. Any additional comments before we accept public comment?
Nope.
I drive around, look at every church now.
Yeah. Pay
Okay.
attention to logos, too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry.
Here.
Yeah.
This is the,
Stereo here. Are we allowing for public comment tonight? I didn't know if I had to wait till next time or not. Okay, folks, anybody want to speak for or against or about this? Please come and give us your name, address.
My name's Eric Molina, and I live at 127 Harrison Drive in Edinburgh, PA. And we have purchased the property at the corner of Westlake Road and Linden Avenue. And presently, the zoning allows for 3-unit buildings, and we'd like to amend the ordinance to allow for 2-unit buildings as well. So down the road, we're requesting to change the zoning to an MU1 for our project. We spoke to Matt about that before we purchased this property, and we don't know if that's possible or not.
So you said eighth of the Linden?
12.
Westlake Road,
Westlake Road.
Linden, yes, so it'd
Eighth,
be
I'm
8th
sorry,
and
yes.
Linden, yes.
Actually, it's 12th and 8th.
Used to be Alta Cachinas and it was tore down.
I'm sorry, what?
Used to be Alta Cachinas and it was tore down.
Okay, so you're the one, okay. Been wondering who that was, okay.
And what would your argument be for the zoning to change?
Well, we're trying to build like high-end residential over 55 condos. So they're going to be, I own Paternity Molina Construction, I build custom homes. So, but Robin Shepner is also gonna be involved in this, and Jessica and Chuck Weber would be also selling them for us, but they're gonna be high-end like my custom homes. So we're trying to keep each one of them the same. So if there are 3 unit in the center, what we all discussed is that center one isn't gonna be as valuable as the 2 on the outside. You just can't, with the light and the windows and everything, you just can't make it as valuable.
It's presently zoned residential and business, I believe. Or it was that way.
Yeah, it's currently zoned MU1 along Westlake and a portion of Linden, and then
The southern parts
R1,
are one.
correct.
We're gonna have to rezone it MU1 for the entire piece. And MU1 has, you can have 3 units or 4 units tied together. You can't have, the way I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't have a 2-unit in an MU1. And we want to build duplexes, 2 units, 2 condos attached, 2 condos attached, et cetera.
Well, that should be an excellent location for what you're talking about.
Well, it would be, so we're looking for an amendment to your current ordinance to allow we might slip a 3 in there, but the way your ordinance is written, we're not allowed to do a 2.
So there's
If we're successful in getting it
no
rezoned.
Korean steakhouse on the corner or anything?
What's that?
No Korean steakhouse on the corner?
Yeah,
That's what they were gonna do.
Yeah, that's.
No,
So
we're
currently,
looking
the
to
part
do
that's
this high-end.
Linden and Westlake Road, that is zoned property for you guys right now, but then the square that goes up in between the homes right now is not zoned properly.
Correct.
Correct.
Even north of that.
How are people gonna feel about having condos in between those? Because people are used to having those, you know, I mean, basically, feel like it's almost like their own yards now, you know what I mean?
Well, you're always gonna have people object to
Sure.
something like this. You're always gonna have this, but this is gonna be very high-end, so it's gonna add a lot of value to their homes.
Yeah, I live on the
We're
road,
gonna thank us.
so I have some skin in the game here. So, yeah, I'm up on the corner of 10th and Linden.
Well, okay.
It will be fenced in and actually will be gated, so, no playgrounds, it'll be very
How many units altogether?
classy.
Laird is working on that right now, so we drew up a plan, took it to Laird's, and Laird's seeing how many we can fit in there to present to you guys for the water retention, obviously, and everything like that.
At 2 or 3 units per. 2 or 3 per unit, I mean, you know,
Well,
2,
he's drawing it up at 2.
yes, correct.
Just one more. So, entrance and exit off onto Westlake or onto Linden also?
Both of them would be onto Linden, because there's an in and an out onto Linden on
Oh,
that
so
property.
You have a exit or an entrance into that property up like 6 or 7
it's correct, yes.
So I wasn't around when the zoning was done, but I think part of the challenge in our country is often thinking about density of zoning in today's world. So probably part of the idea was of having higher density, that you would have, for lack of a better word, more access to housing in Mill Creek Township. You have 3 units versus 2, although obviously that's just one piece of property. So it's really a little bit of a lower density, higher density from what the township as a whole is trying to do. And there's different ways to look at that, but
Yeah, we're trying to do less than more. We're trying to make it nice we're trying to make it for the 55 and older crowd.
yeah.
Because like Chuck and a lot of the realtors that I know that keep, I guess there's a lot of demand for this in Erie right now. A lot of these people go to Florida and they want something like this to go back and forth to. And there's people that want it to be nice.
Sure.
Obviously, there's gonna be green space in between.
But it's already zoned for a triplex. I mean, to have duplex is actually less than.
Okay, and this, on a particular size lot, if going by all the standard or the existing ordinances, if you were to cover that, let's say 2-acre lot with all the green space and the roadways and everything with 3-unit buildings, assuming you have to have with a 3-unit or a 2-unit, to have the same distance between the buildings. If you have 2-unit buildings, your population goes down
Correct,
by some percentage.
correct. We're not looking to jam people in there and rent them. I mean, we're looking to build these and have Chuck sell them.
You're gonna be somewhere between 16 and 1,800 square feet. So they're nice sized units.
Mhm.
With the option to finish the basement. I mean, we're gonna do 13-course basements with, egress, so they'll have the option if they have family that comes home to be able to finish the basements.
So our goal here is we're selling condos, we're not making these into rental properties.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I'm all good with that.
Not to hold you to it, but what price range you talking about on a square footage basis?
He's old, he fits that crowd, 55 to
Chuck,
85.
so Chuck and I differ on this. Chuck would like to be more to the 400,000. I'd like to be more to the 500,000. I'd like to really make them nice like I make my homes. We haven't exactly settled on that, so at the end of the day, I have to listen to him, so,
He has more wisdom.
Well,
yes.
you'd be the first one that ever did.
I guess one question for staff. So I guess with the zoning being opened up, we could look at other areas to potentially rezone. I guess my question is, are we looking at, because the current classification is what's the current classification?
MU1/R1.
Okay. So I'm just trying to strike the balance of one spot versus multiple spots. It seems a little spot, for lack of a better word, versus that we're looking at the whole zoning code, but if we're looking at one part, it seems like a lot of what we're doing is broad, and this is a more specific request, which is understandable.
Yep, and it would, I believe correct me if I'm wrong, I heard 2 requests here. So the first request was to allow duplexes in the MU1, is what you're looking for. And then you're also looking for rezoning the entire parcel to MU1 rather than this current split zone.
Obviously, we're gonna do that at a later date, but
Okay.
yes.
So, personally, and it would be up to, both the commission and the board of supervisors. Right now, you're correct, David. We're looking more at the regulations in the zoning than the map and making map changes. And so, I think if you're willing to contemplate their proposed change, you can direct us to add that to the draft as far as the duplexes in MU1. I do believe, especially because it's a map change, that's more suited for just an individual action, because you would notify all of the adjoining neighbors would be required to, or something like that. So it's probably something better handled at a separate hearing than this more regulation-focused hearing that we'll be having. Just my opinion.
So we're not
So
really
kind of
voting
a-
on anything today, basically, we're just
You're not
hearing,
voting on
we're hearing
anything.
stuff, we're just getting a feel.
This is your
for
first
what-
look at the draft, any proposed changes over the next month.
I just want clarification of what you said. You didn't mean that you were gonna go in for a rezoning at a later date, did you? You did? Because I would caution you not to do, I'd get it done,
Well,
because you
we
never
hope
know,
to, but we're
we
not
may not be
ready.
here and.
Doug, if we go in for rezoning, we're not ready, we don't have anything to show at this point.
Well, I'm just cautioning you that you might not get that rezoning sometime in the
Well, we
future.
understand that.
Well, I mean, we'd be fine if you guys did it tonight, but we don't have a drawing from Laird to present to you. They just started that. Now I have a drawing with the building we started, but Jessica's working on for sale the gingerbread and Robin that are gonna be partners in the LLC, and that's not done either. So we really can't present to you exactly what they're gonna look like and how many there's gonna be.
Well, what I meant is, I'd get all that stuff worked out before you end up doing
Well,
something.
For the rezone, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, we understand, for sure.
I guess what we're asking tonight
Just
is,
to protect
is
yourself.
it possible, or are we wasting our time? Because to have John Laird draw this all up with 2 units, obviously, we're gonna spend a lot of money doing
Sure.
that.
Well, it sounds to me like a great project. But I'm just saying to protect yourself, you don't wanna get into piecemeal with
Right.
this thing.
Right.
And just to understand, there are the two pieces, because I think part of the trying to have triplexes, for lack of a better word, is to increase the ability to have, provide more housing options in Mill Creek Township, broad-based. Now, this specific one might be obviously a very different one. So it's the whole and the individual. And again, I don't know if we can really say, it seems quite possible, but it is hard to say at this point in time as we're looking at these two things.
Why is it restricted to 3 units in that zone? And not, you know, if you think about it, like we were discussing, 2-unit things would be less, let's say, families on the property, less cars, less traffic.
I think the reason why it was limited to the townhomes, 3 units of triplexes, or 3 plus, is that was, I think the envision of the corridor districts to have 3 or more units as opposed to 2 units. Now, with that being said, I was taking a look at the comprehensive plan under the land use and zoning and future land use map, which has the neighborhood mixed use defined as, neighborhood mixed use designation identifies areas that are appropriate for both low density residential uses and limited commercial uses. So, at least this is my professional opinion, it's to at least avoid single-family dwellings. I could see duplexes being consistent with that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Longyear. But I think it's not an affront to the ordinance to allow duplexes in the MU1 district, because I think it would be, you would at least have the goals of the comprehensive plan moving forward for that low-density residential. And just for, I guess, just to realize how much density is permitted in the MU1 district, it's 12 units per developable acre, which is actually a significant bump. Not the largest, most robust of the residential densities, but that's a significant increase to what it was prior.
Yeah, and I think just to put a capper on that, Matt covered it well, yeah. Dave, it wasn't so much style as the number of units you could fit. Now, you're not wrong that if you have less, smaller units, you probably fit less than if you had the three in, but they would still be bound by the density regulations, not the housing style. We tried to decouple those.
But you would, by doing the 2-unit, you're decreasing the density.
Potentially,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, it would be up to their design and how they
Yeah.
fit them on the lot. Correct.
So we're thinking probably about 7 of these duplexes.
Tell us who you
Oh, I'm Jessica.
are. I mean, you gotta give your address.
This is one of the owners.
Okay, but you gotta give your address.
Oh, okay.
Well, at least your name.
You know,
But as long as you signed it in the back.
I did, I signed in
Your
the
full,
back.
just your full name then, so we know for the
Okay.
record.
I'm Jessica Laverty. My address is 127 Harrison Drive, Edinburgh. So we're thinking to do probably 7 of these duplexes and a common building, a community building for the residents. We want to keep as many of the historic trees that we can, so it doesn't look like a stark, new, fresh look. We kind of keep that patina of the original property. So it's gonna be very tastefully done, and like I said, 7, we could maybe get 8 in there, but we're kind of thinking, after Laird will do all their water retention, probably 7.
That's with the duplexes.
That's with the duplexes, and then 1 common building. And the common building would just be, a small kitchen and area for the residents to gather if they had a party, an outdoor space, things like that.
Okay. Sounds like
And I guess if I could just, one more, because I did this part of the discussion, I had to help somebody in the lobby, but, Dave, I know you weren't here, but the rest of you were. When we did our rewrite in 2022, because it was a comprehensive rezone of the entire township and we were changing everything, we did not have to notify individual adjoining property owners. Something like this, where you're taking a specific property and changing the zoning, and we'd have to go through the full, notification of all the property owners and everything.
And that's the rest of that too.
Okay, yeah, just wanted to make sure everybody was. Sure.
understand. But they were gonna do that regardless.
Yeah, even if you did just a standard rezoning process, you'd have to do the same notification.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but I had a scheduled 7 o'clock meeting. Based on past history, I thought that was fairly safe. It's actually in Edinburgh, so I'm going to be a little bit late, but thank you for your time.
You're
Thank
going
you
to the
for your
hockey,
time.
you're going to the hockey game.
No, I'm going to a naming rights meeting.
With locals?
They have different rules now.
Watch that board.
Okay, so we are merely discussing these tonight. Does anybody have anything else to say about that? I mean, we'll have to put this, well, first of all, it's gonna be in the minutes, but, for discussion, more discussion on this one too, huh?
I mean, at this time, you could make a recommendation to include that as an amendment to the ordinance.
To do it,
No, but, by consensus or by your, I guess that's where I was gonna go next. As far as the commission is concerned, would you like to see us at least propose that change to the NU1 district to allow duplexes as well? This would only go into the draft, which would then be discussed at the next.
I'm trying to figure out why that ever got in there to begin with.
I think if you look at where the MU1
Okay.
is in here, I think it was, this is just based on my recollection from looking, whereas, if you look at the whole map of where the MU1 is already kind of a commercial built-up area, abutting residential, so you don't want it to be, you want to be able to have that flexibility for 3, but you don't, the 2 is, duplexes are permitted in R2, I think, right?
CR and R2.
CR and R2, which are in the more densely zoned areas. But with the MU1s, they're kind of on the cusp
that was, if this is the only thing that slipped through, it'll be a miracle.
So we don't have to do this in form of a motion or anything, we can just say,
No,
yes, let's go
if
ahead.
that is
I
something
recommend
that you'd like, we can at least write it into the next draft to
Why don't you write that
discuss and vote it on for
Okay.
the next meeting.
Yeah, or 2 or 3 units, or however you'd want to word it.
Or triplex.
Well, we encourage you to go ahead.
Okay,
I would-
thank you.
I'd like to thank you for bringing this to our attention here, actually, because I still don't understand why it's like that.
We're all done.
Are we
I don't think we've never had that come before us, I don't believe, to dispute this whole thing, is it?
Well, now we know how to direct later.
So we'll keep that moving forward with the 2 units to present
Encourage you to,
I
to you guys, so.
would, I mean,
You know,
we don't know if it's gonna happen, but,
that's just what I was gonna caution you.
It makes
We'll end up with
sense.
this draft, it will be presented then to the planning commission in May, depending on their vote and their recommendation. It then, I don't know if you've heard the whole schedule Matt laid out, but we have to then send it to the Erie County Planning Commission, we have to have 30 days of public comment. So the earliest this could actually be formally voted on by the supervisors would be June 25th.
June
We're talking about the zone.
We're changing all of these rules, which would include adding the duplexes to the MU2.
You guys,
We wouldn't know for sure if the supervisors had approved it or not until June 25th.
So it's gonna be tied together.
Yeah, all of our changes.
yeah.
Are you
All the
talking about
amendments
like
that
map
we
change too?
Woody?
Just,
I'm sorry.
are you talking about map change and the MU2 request, or just all of them?
That's what he wants to know.
That's where I'm headed here, yeah. Are we okay with the duplex?
This board can't make that decision. They can propose it to the supervisors. Then we have to go, because we're changing the zoning code along with all the other things we discussed today.
So do
So
you
it would
wanna-
just be added in, but couldn't be approved until June 25th.
So you don't want a drawing for that?
No.
We
No,
don't need
no,
a
no,
drawing
no.
for that. This is
You're
just
just gonna
changes
explain
to the
them,
rules.
or we have to come back and
Yeah.
explain? Yeah.
Yeah, so all we're doing is we're just making a recommendation saying that we're allowing duplexes along with the threeplexes or triplexes.
But they also.
Along with all the other changes that are in this document.
Okay.
But
So
you
this is
also,
going in as a group. Then
Now,
it
a
comes back
caution.
and
but he
everybody
also
votes on
wants
it.
to
Is that
know
correct?
about the result.
A caution, this commission consists of several more people than are here tonight. And it sounds to me like the 3 that are here tonight are certainly in favor of doing what we're talking about doing.
But the next question is when would the rezoning be?
Well, we gotta get going. We understand.
That would be a separate meeting.
That's a
They
whole
would have to
separate
submit
issue.
their request, and then we would put it on the next agenda.
So
And
when
we
is
are,
the
we are
earliest
nothing
that-
but a recommending body. The supervisors
They
can
could propose it.
go against our recommendation if they so fit or feel like it, whatever.
But
you know.
what you're saying makes sense.
So
I
there are
would
no
go
guarantees
forward
here.
with actually drawing it up, having Blair draw it up as duplexes. But what you're saying doesn't offend anybody, it makes sense, so I don't really see anything that's gonna stand in your way.
It just depends on your level of comfort, without having the surety will not come until, June 25th at the earliest. for the vote matters.
But the earliest,
Whatever your comfort level is. to
the
do
zoning
so.
would be in May, right?
Yeah, we're not good.
So one of the owners wants to start in the fall, so what you're saying is that's never gonna happen? Pretty much by what saying.
I don't know.
Just so we can go back and tell her
Again,
that.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards, we can kind of chat about it offline.
And the big reason is for the price that we have, and how nice we wanna make them. The 3rd unit's gonna devalue the other 2 units. That's the big reason.
And that's, from a business standpoint, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's gonna cost the same amount of money to build a 3rd unit and between the other 2 to
It is, but it's not gonna be good for the other two units, and that's not what we're looking for. We're trying to, everybody seems to want something, that retired crowd, something very nice. And that third one's probably gonna deter people.
Well, I'll stick around a little bit after maybe, and we can chat for a few, and I can try and answer any of your other questions.
Okay,
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.
That is, or?
Are we done?
Not, I have not adjourned yet.
I can make a motion.
I didn't ask for
I'm
one.
gonna second the motion he's got to make.
Motion.
Is that it for tonight?
I have no other issue.
Hey, Chuck,
I will entertain
stick around a second.
a motion.
Well, he did.
Oh, we did.
I seconded it.
He did before I after said that.
Okay, I make a motion to adjourn.
Excuse.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?